And so we're going to discuss 3 interrelated deliverables from the Biennial Implementation Plan. The first deliverable is 1.3.1, that's under priority area 1, and that is about generating maps of erosion, permafrost thaw, and flood risk. Second deliverable is developing high-resolution models of coastal processes at the interface of ocean, land, and atmosphere. And the third deliverable is identifying natural and human-made threats and hazards posing risks to communities. And so I'm hoping that the leads for each of these deliverables is online today and can sort of lead off with a description of the deliverable from their point of view and the kind of work that they're doing. And then we'll have a discussion following that. So with that, I'm thinking Lee Erickson is online. Lee, would you like to lead next?
Yes. Okay. You can hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, great. So, yeah, did you want us to do the briefing now? That's what you're intending. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So we have a few slides, and we're kind of seeing that our deliverables as part of the work that we're doing right now addresses both deliverable 1.31 and 2.37, those first 2 items that are listed in the agenda. So we thought that we just talk through the sort of the deliverables in this project. So I'll speak a little bit, just really briefly on one slide, and then Dee Williams will speak, and then Anne, if she is connected. She's having trouble connecting. But I will start off, and I'm going to share my screen. Let me see here, this one. And that's visible? Hi, everyone?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we're starting on a large and regional scale and working our way down towards the local scale. Our end point is to make flood hazard maps and coastal hazard maps for communities and other stretches along the Alaska coastal area. But we're starting at the larger global scale and working our way downward in order to account for climate change that's happening. So we're looking at the teleconnections and such that cause those effects. So if you're looking on the left-hand side of the slide, you'll see a little graphic of the globe, and that's meant to depict the reanalysis and CMIP6 global climate models that we use for winds, atmospheric pressures, and sea ice fields. And we take those high resolution products that are available at 5-kilometer resolution, and we do dynamical downscaling. So that means that we do numerical modeling to bring it down to realizations along the coast of Alaska. And so we're dynamically downscaling waves, that's wave heights, periods, directions, as well as storm surge and tides. And with that, the deliverable is hourly time series at points along the coast that are at about 200 meters and 500 meters along the coast. That the whole grid is on that order. Those time series will go from 1979 all the way through 250. So now I'm looking at the right-hand side of the slide. And we have a reanalysis data set, which is meant to be kind of the ground truth or the baseline of what has been happening. And then we have the CMIP6 historical and CMIP6 projection. So the CMIP6 are the 6th generation of the coordinated MIPS. So for the IPCC projections, and we're using the 8.5 scenario, the more extreme scenario. The historical time period overlaps with the reanalysis time period, so we can make comparisons as to the quality of the models. And then the projection goes from 2020 to 2050. And for these CMIP6 historical and projections, we're also looking at, we're dynamically downscaling, thus producing hourly time series from 4 different realizations. And so we're ending up with temporally consistent wave and water level time series for the 4 GCMs that are listed there on that slide. That allows for looking at standard deviations and variability amongst different GCMs. Next, Dee will talk about bringing that down to the community level. And want to go ahead, Dee?
Hi, everyone. I want to introduce myself first. Maybe you don't know me. I know many of you, but this is the first time I've been in this particular group setting. So I am the Deputy Regional Director for the Alaska region of USGS, based in Anchorage, Alaska. And I've been with Department of Interior in Alaska now for more than 20 years. And I've been participating in IARPC for more than 15 years. And I currently represent DOI as the staff group lead for Department of Interior. I was involved in a lot of the Arctic research planning, development, and the steering committee for the Biennial Implementation Plan. So very happy to see all this come to fruition and now start to get liftoff, and thanks to Meredith and Tom for setting all this up. So I'm going to repeat a bit about what Lee just said, but put it in somewhat different words. I am not an expert in oceanography or the modeling component here. My background is in anthropology, and so I am working with Lee in bringing all of these wonderful modeling tools and downscale analysis to the benefit of Arctic Alaska. That's the goal here. Lee and her team have been very busy employing the model in other places throughout California and the East Coast and the Pacific Islands. And so I feel very fortunate that we've attracted their interest and attention to help us develop these products for at-risk communities in Alaska. So what we're describing really is just the initial pilot phase of a longer-term effort that USGS is orienting toward this particular hazard and threat. So we are starting with 3 communities, and as they develop, we hope to expand more broadly as resources become available and as we gain our footing about how these products actually can provide useful assistance to the communities. So I would emphasize in ways that Lee would be too modest, that the project is cutting edge in that only a few studies attempt to identify future flood hazards from rising sea levels with combined effects of coastal storms brought about by climate variability, erosion, and river discharge. So we're trying to throw all of those dynamic aspects into a single modeling effort. And the main goal of the pilot phase is to use modeling, this modeling platform to inform and help co-produce locally customized flood hazard maps and online tools to support the development of culturally appropriate and cost-efficient adaptation strategies. So that's the idea. Like I say, we're just getting underway with some modest funding and hopefully additional funding to follow. But we're starting with our community visits to Unalakleet and Elam in February of this year. And in July, we're expecting to also initiate our co-production efforts in Utqiagvik. And so the idea really is for each village to produce 30 to 60 flood hazard maps based on these various scenarios that Lee described. 6 sea level rise scenarios, 5 extreme storm event scenarios, and then also there's an assumed or dynamic shoreline component that we're hoping to capture in the modeling effort. So these model outputs will be produced and displayed on a web viewer platform with various GIS layers so that we can show the model output against various critical assets, such as community infrastructure, all the roads, the communication centers, schools, water resources, all the things that a community would want to know about in the event of an extreme storm event. And then on top of that, we also intend to collect areas of local cultural importance, such as subsistence use areas, cultural resource assets that otherwise might not be fully encapsulated in these kind of viewer platforms. So we're also in the middle of constructing alternative viewing structures. So this is, again, where the co-production has to come into effect to determine exactly what kind of display and what kinds of selection choices the user would prefer to have to make these products most viable. So we are asked to present in a very short time frame. And so I think I'll just stop there and hope that question and answers will lead us into areas where there's interest for more detail. So I'll stop there. And I think Anne is with us now, so I'll turn it over to her.
So I know Anne is having a little connectivity problems today. Let's see. I guess you're not able to connect, Anne. I'm checking my texts too.
I'll send her the phone information as well.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, actually, if you would do that, and maybe we can come back to this, actually.
Yeah, actually, Lee, I would suggest, we were thinking that since USGS had the floor, we would just go ahead and play through the various deliverables. But so far, we can just remain on 131, basically. What we're trying to do is say that we are contributing to this deliverable. It's not a comprehensive, not the full state suite of modeling that would be most desirable over the long haul, but this is definitely an initial and contributing step toward an important IARPC deliverable. So I think that that's sufficient for the USGS component for 1.31, and hopefully, like I say, after I don't know how, if Tom wants to go to NASA next to talk about their dimension for 131 or take questions now, that would be fine.
I guess I'll just add to that just a little bit, just that we have done a lot of historical rate changes already. And that is being on the North Slope and on the, as you see, phase 2 over here, where we're currently working on phase 3. And that's detailed change analysis. And we're also now going into the realm of extracting shorelines from satellites and trying to see if we can get that to work to do more updates, continuous updates of shoreline change using satellites. I'll just leave it at that. And Tom? Yeah?
Okay. Well, I think it's a good time to take give a chance for members of the audience to ask questions. So Guess if someone has a question, maybe they could raise their hand, or maybe you could just jump right in. Provide a little feedback to Lee and Dee.
And
And since I'm not, go for it.
I see that Jonathan has raised his hand. I also want to check to see if that was you that just called in.
Yes, that's
Okay. Great. I guess maybe if you have anything you want to add at this moment, you're welcome to.
I could go through the slides, and I'm here for Excel here too. Why don't we go ahead and move on?
Okay.
I was going to say, can I ask a question?
Yes, Jonathan had his hand raised, so I want to give him the floor, and then we'll move to you, Aaron.
More of a comment than a question, but Lee, you had mentioned that your group was interested in working on deriving coastlines from satellite. I'm with the Polar Geospatial Center, University of Minnesota, and we work with high resolution commercial satellite imagery, and we have coastal maps that I think may be very helpful to this. So perhaps we can connect after the call, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with some others in our group to see if it might be beneficial for this effort.
It'd be great. I'll follow up with you.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, I would just add, that's exactly the kind of interaction we're hoping to generate from this kind of work group. We all have some nexus point, I think, to these issues. And so the degree to which we can share information that's mutually beneficial is certainly what we're after. I can add that I don't see anybody from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on the phone, but for example, one key interface for this project involves coordination with their work on harbor feasibility study for safe navigation in both Unalakleet and Elam. So that's an exciting example of ways in which some synergies and leverage of effort can occur. So thanks for that comment.
Great.
Aaron?
Well, thank you.
Sorry, Tom, didn't mean to walk over you there.
I'm happy if you want to, organize the question answers, but I was just going to see if Erin was ready to ask her question.
Yes, I was going to say my group has done quite a bit of work with the COSAT product, so I'm happy to see it getting used. It would be great to follow up with you more, though, Lee, and about that. So yeah, we're getting pretty close to wanting to publish something on that, and there's good things about COSAT, is what I'll say. There's also really annoying things about COSAT. And yeah, it'd be great to talk a little bit more about that offline and share. And if there's an interest in using that method more, definitely probably investing more in the COSAT methodology would be a good idea, would be my professional advice.
Yeah, we are actually going down the road of COSAT and COSEG, both of them. So yeah, good. Let's definitely talk. And yeah, this is great. Maybe we should all meet, Jonathan, you and us at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great.
This is Ann. I'll just chime in on that satellite drive. Like our vision is to try and come up with an operational workflow to come up with semi-regular satellite drive shorelines, both for kind of operational hazard sort of perspective monitoring, but also as input to our coastal change models. So it would be great. We're just kind of diving into this area. to look at this on a very large scale. And our focus area initially will be the Merbach kind of hazard area, Merbach impacted area, mostly Norton Sound.
Mhm.
So it'd be great to talk with you guys for sure.
Great. Anyone else have something they want to bring up?
Yeah, this is Jackie Overbeck. So I get a chance to work with Lee and Ann on a regular basis. So I'm familiar with the project and thanks for presenting out on it today to this group. I just wanted to say that in working, I'm with NOAA's Office for Coastal Management here in Anchorage, and I work directly with the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium and a host of communities that they support with technical assistance on the flood, erosion, and permafrost issues. We've been working on an update to the Denali Commission prototype scope of work for coastal flood and erosion analysis with a science and technical advisory panel. The reason for that is that many communities are also still seeking private consultants to conduct flood and erosion assessments for them, with very little technical guidance or oversight of what those results look like. So in developing a more specified scope of work, provide communities with additional information that they can use for these projects and get a more consistent product that's more actionable for the communities. So I just wanted to mention that to this group because USGS is working on a certain number of communities, and I think there's going to be additional communities out there that need a product, and we'll be seeking those out. And so it's good that we have consistency across, what's being produced from USGS and from others. So thanks USGS for being an active collaborator on that. And if anybody's interested in seeing what that scope of work ends up looking like, they can contact me, but that'll get updated on the Denali Commission website as well.
Great, thank you, Jacqueline. Does anyone else have something they want to add to the conversation? I personally am interested in learning a little bit more about the how you sort of combine the flooding from the coast, from the ocean side, with river flooding. It seems like you are basically accounting for what we call compound flooding. So if that's something that you'd be able to explain a little bit, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll just say it in just a couple sentences. So for the flood modeling, we are doing 2D X-Beach model runs, and we're inputting fluvial discharges at the landward boundary when it's appropriate. And those fluvial discharges, a big question is, what might they be in the future? That work has not really been flushed out by our research community, the whole research community, as far as I know. At least if somebody does know, then that would be wonderful. So what we are falling back upon is hindcasted fluvial discharges and making correlations with those at each specific community, and correlating those with precipitation patterns, and then looking at the future precipitation patterns and deducing a fluvial discharge from that and putting that into the X-Beach models.
So I hear like a little bit of an invitation. If there is somebody who's actually developing predictive models of fluvial discharge, maybe making use of GCM output or making use of SNAP, then you might like to have a conversation.
Yes.
there anything else? Any other comments or questions from the audience? Well, we could go to the third deliverable, and is Liza Mack online?
Hi there. Yeah, I am. I wasn't, I was just kind of waiting for a second before we got into this one because it all kind of builds on everything that we've just been talking about, and especially the stuff that Jackie just brought up too about updating some of the things that we have with our partners here at the Denali Commission. But the deliverable 4.2.3 to collect and integrate the threats and hazards, we are looking to update our statewide threat assessment. And I think that it has a lot of these components that we've already been talking about. But one of the things that we would like to do is to kind of revisit some of this methodology, especially as we see some of the things coming out with like the prototypes of the coastal flooding and how things are changing and how we're building better modeling, and so how that actually goes into the statewide threat assessment. So those are just some of the things that we've been discussing. I haven't had a chance to get a hold of Annika, who's also going to be working on this IARPC deliverable. And so I guess that's really where we are, is really just looking at the also inviting partners to help with the statewide threat assessment and help with this methodology so that the deliverable is does speak to what the hazards and the threats really are. And so being able to incorporate some of this data, especially this rich data that you guys are already collecting, and how that modeling and how these different mechanisms kind of contribute to that. So I didn't really have anything else more extensive than that, but just the fact that just to kind of invite the partners and also let you guys know where we are in the process as well.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have a question for Liza? I think that, Liza is from the Denali Commission, and the Denali Commission is sort of charged with developing the statewide threat assessment. You've put out a threat assessment, I believe, in 2019, and you're probably gearing up to provide an updated threat assessment. Is that right, Liza?
Yeah, we are. And we've worked on with multiple partners from this group and others on this threat assessment over the years. This will be the first time that I'm involved in it. This is actually, I guess I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Liza Mack, a program manager with the Denali Commission. I manage both the transportation and the village infrastructure protection program. And I have been involved with IARPC prior. And then in my previous position with one of the permanent participants for the Arctic Council, I was also involved with IARPC from that perspective. And so, so it's nice to be involved from this side of things. So nice to be here. But yeah, Jackie and Aaron both have their hands up if you don't see them. So
thank you.
Jackie.
Yeah, thanks, Liza. So I guess my question is along the lines of, with our understanding of what data sets have been updated, this USGS modeling project potentially providing a lot of information for communities, but taking some time, is the Denali Commission considering making that update to the statewide threat assessment at a time that it can ingest that data once it's actually completed? So I don't know what that would look like for your timeline. And then I'm just wondering, what other data sets are really out there that are going to be used for the update, because I'm not familiar with many that are consistent across the whole group of communities that get analyzed. And I know that that was a challenge in the last update, is, wanting to have a really consistent way of evaluating the threat for communities, and whether or not that can be achieved, because, one set of communities has data to this level and another here. So I'm curious there's more information on those data sets and kind of what your timeline is for being able to incorporate those. Maybe Aaron has some on that too.
Oh, I was gonna ask the same question, Jackie, as you. It's just yeah, um, thinking forward and putting in everybody's mind the need for a timeline. And I've joked that it's probably a decadal long timeline about like where would we like the modeling to eventually get to, and what's feasible in the next year, the next 2 years, and the next 3 years, and how do these projects overlap with being able to provide the types of, I would call it, continual coverage throughout the state
Sure.
that are necessary for doing the statewide threat assessment again.
Yeah, I mean, those are really good questions, and that's really something that, like I said, that we're just kind of getting into as far as what the methodology is and how we're going to use the data that has been collected that has some holes in it, and how we're going to incorporate this newer data that is very rich and more all-encompassing. And so being able to figure out how that standardizes to kind of give a better overview of some of these threats is kind of what we're hoping to get out of the entire process too. So just kind of jumping into it, and we haven't discussed a lot of these issues just yet. So, I mean, thank you for these questions, because they're really great to think about, and to think about planning and how to plan something that is going to make the deliverable useful, and also be able to bring in some of these other components that probably haven't been used as much in the past. And then also, fleshing out some of those things, I think that to Jackie's point about just just people having used, private consultants and what their methodology was, and figuring out which, what things were accurate and or not. So, so just kind of thinking through a lot of that is where we are in the process.
Lee, did you have your hand up there?
I was just typing it in the chat, but I'll just say it. We anticipate that the modeling for the communities in the Bering Sea to be completed by 2026.
Okay, thank you.
So, Liza, is there any other questions out there? One question that I have, Liza, is about methodology. One thing that we've been doing on a very small scale is estimating the cost of flooding, as well as the cost of erosion. And I know the DGGS has done some similar work. It seems to me that if you can sort of generate an estimate of the cost of flooding for all the coastal communities, as well as the cost of erosion for those communities, and maybe the cost of permafrost thaw and all that, and then you can look at that in conjunction with estimates of the cost of relocations, you're really providing the data that is helpful to do long-term planning. Because what I'm thinking is that if we really do get something like 6 feet of sea level rise by the end of the century, it's going to be really hard for a lot of these communities to really survive, honestly. And so, and you would see that really clearly if you actually estimated the cost. Well, what would it actually take to prevent the community from getting flooded out if you have 6 feet of sea level rise? And so that way you really get some sort of, maybe a little bit harsh, but you get some serious data that real world that sort of relates to the extreme vulnerability of these communities in the face of severe climate change impacts. So I think that it makes sense to me, at least, that we should be moving towards that direction, put things on a cost basis. Not to say that everything can be reduced to cost, but it's an important component to a decision-making process, it seems to me. So I'm kind of curious if you, Liza, or anyone else has any feedback on that idea.
Go ahead, Jackie.
Yeah, so your suggestion, Tom, makes me think of an activity that Dawn had organized. I believe it was in response to the statewide threat assessment, but it might have been for the unmet needs report. I think the statewide threat assessment was already complete. And so in development of the unmet needs report, which I've been working closely with ANTHC, obviously, and they're continuing to develop that report out. It's in final stages and looking at release by the end of the month. So that could be something that I share with this group once it is released. But there were some really rough order of magnitude cost assessments associated with the various adaptation pathways that communities might choose to go down. And those were selected in some meetings with subject matter experts that worked in specific regions and just had good knowledge of the communities and the hazards in general, and saying, hey, this community doesn't necessarily have the land to migrate infrastructure upland or out of permafrost areas. And so they might be looking at wholesale relocation, answering questions like that. And we didn't necessarily evaluate whether sea level rise, and particularly the extreme scenarios for sea level rise, would be a part of that. And so maybe we would be looking at updating that sort of analysis or that sort of activity of getting folks together and saying, hey, we know more about what our sea level projections are out to 2050 and 2100. Maybe we need to take that into consideration in addition to these other factors. But I do think that is a part of the process that has been taken. And then as far as the cost estimates, I know that they put very generalized values on whatever adaptation solutions were going to be identified for communities. So whether communities could move infrastructure out of flood zone or out of an erosion zone versus relocation. But I think there's still a lot to be done on figuring out what those costs really are. And I think there's a lot of gaps there. So we're not starting at square one, Liza, but we would have to get Don back involved probably in talking about what he did for that report.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like I said, I'm just barely getting to where this is like at one of the tasks that I'm kind of focusing on, just because of all the things that we've been busy with over here at the commission. And so, no, all this is very useful, helpful information. I will be reaching out to you, I think a lot of you, to kind of work through this and then, develop those methodologies and to make sure that we do have the information that we need to make sure that the statewide threat assessment is a useful tool for all of us going forward, and that it also, can meet some of the deliverable for our IARPC.
Well, great. So sounds like the statewide assessment and the methodology is sort of still being developed.
Well, yeah, I mean, it has been done before, but we are making sure that, as we go through the process that, we're continually, evaluating what works, what doesn't work, what should be incorporated, what could be incorporated to enhance and or, make this better.
Great. Does anyone else have any comments, contributions to the conversation here? Jackie, you were mentioning that the ANTHC is developing this cost assessment for sort of remote communities. And you mentioned Dawn. Is Dawn the person who's sort of lead on that effort?
So there was some cost assessment. Liza, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I'm kind of not with the cost assessment, but ANTHC is also actually looking to start a center for risk assessments so that a lot of this information can actually be in one space and consolidated. And I think that that's a good place to probably house a lot of this information that we're kind of talking about and, you know, building into some of these reports and deliverables. And so I just wanted to mention that we're kind of excited about that possibility and how that looks and what kind and how useful that would be.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Liza. And I'm an active partner on that too, so I can talk more about the risk assessment program if we have interest or time today. But in regard to cost assessment, so I wouldn't say that, you know, the final report that will be delivered is a cost assessment, but there is some cost assessing on a very broad scale that's been done as a part of the unmet needs report for Alaska Native villages dealing with flooding, erosion, and permafrost issues. So looking at more broad changes to how federal dollars make it down to communities and what it would take in order to address issues. One of those issues being that many communities don't have access to information about risk at the local scale that they can utilize for community planning. And so that's where the development of a risk assessment program comes in to say, we do want to have a standardized way in which communities can participate or request participation in so that their community can gain access to that localized data, and really honing in the energy of many different federal entities that might fund that work to one particular program that can then serve many communities.
And ANTAC is taking the lead on that effort, sounds like.
Yeah, they're actually talking about actually setting that up as far as it just being a risk assessment, a center for risk assessment. You know, they currently have the Center for Economic or Environmentally Threatened Communities, CETC, and so this would be similar in the sense that just is a place for all of the risk assessment information to be kind of housed and for them to be kind of taking the lead in understanding a lot of these risks and threats.
So it looks like we're sort of the conversation is closing down. Is that a fair statement? Anyone have any last words they want to speak before we close down our meeting today? I'm curious if this was a good way to have a coastal resilience meeting, to sort of have the leads on some of these deliverables present what they're doing and their outlook, and having the community respond to that. Is that a good thing to do in a community of practice meeting?
I felt like it was very helpful.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Tom, and this is Kathy chiming in from the Marine Ecosystems Group. I'm actually really impressed by this style of community of practice meeting. I thought it was really useful and applicable, and I like the audience that was here today. So good job to you guys.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, I think with these meetings, it's all about audience participation, right? You can have the presentation, but if the community doesn't sort of engage with these presenters, then it's not quite as good a meeting. So I think we were very fortunate today to have a lot of good input from lots of folks. And so thank you very much for your participation. You guys make it a successful meeting. So Meredith, is there anything we need to do as we close down this meeting?
I'll just note that this meeting was recorded and will be posted online on Thursday. Yeah, there also might be some notes that are available as well. And thanks everyone for coming to discuss, and reach out to any of the coastal resilience team leads if you have, or myself, if you have questions about follow-up items or needing like emails or contact information for different people.
So Meredith, one thing I was just wondering, it's sort of like a general question. It's like very often there's lots of information that goes into chat. Is that available after the meeting, or is there a way to save chat so that it's available so you can,
Yes.
mine the chat?
Yep. Yeah, I believe Christina and Liz were capturing that as well.
Okay, great. So that will be available on the Coastal Resilience website somewhere?
Yes.
Along with the recording? Great. Well, great. Well, thank you very much for attending the meeting, and thank you. Thanks to all the contributions, all the input, and look forward to a follow-up meeting soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.